Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. So I feel like it's been a really long time since I've sat in front of the camera and just did a sit down talk to you guys about hair type of video, which is weird because I feel like that's what my channel is mostly about. I've been really off my YouTube game lately, which is not unusual for me, but I feel like lately has been the offest I have ever been. So anyway, I'm trying to get back to it, so here we go. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about being a hair braider and doing it as an at-home or traveling business again. But I'm going to be explaining common mistakes that are made, and these are all mistakes that I've made, so I've learned from them. So I want to explain those mistakes to you guys so that you guys don't have to go through them. So you guys can learn from my mistakes today. So really quickly, for those of you guys who don't know me, I do hair braiding more than anything, but I also do weaves and crochet styles and different kind of natural hair services, and I do them out of my house or I do it at other people's house as a traveling hairstylist. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I've been doing it for a couple years now, but when I first started out, I didn't even realize that I was turning this into a business, so I made a lot of mistakes. So I have them all written down here, and hopefully I didn't forget anything, so I'm just gonna go through them with you guys. So the first and biggest mistake that I made when I first started out was I didn't have a price list. I had no set prices for anything. I always had a general idea of how much certain services should cost, but whenever people will ask me how much I would charge for a service, or they'll come to me asking if I could do something, and I'll be like, yeah, I can. They'll want to know how much I charge for it, and I'll have no price in mind, and I would panic and I would just throw a number at them. Not even lying, that's really how I was. I would just be like, $55, $70, like I would just be throwing numbers. And a lot of times when I give them a price, a lot of times they'll say something like, oh, that's it. And I always hated when that happened because that meant that I seriously undercharged myself. Or other times they would make a face like an, oh, that's a lot of money type of face, and I won't know if it's really too expensive and I should lower it or if they're just being cheap. But the thing is, I never really knew how much I should be charging, so I was just kind of all over the place. And the bad thing was that I had to remember how much I charged them. So for example, I'm just gonna make up something. So somebody would ask me how much it is to, I don't know, to get a quick weave, and I will say something like $50, and then a few weeks later somebody else would ask me for a quick weave and I forget what I charged that person, so I would say $70. So obviously that's messed up because I have people all over the place getting the same services from me, but everyone's paying a different price. So luckily I never got into the situation where two people knew each other and knew they're paying two completely different prices, but I was always at risk for that. And whether or not I got caught, it was still unfair no matter how you look at it, because that means somewhere along the line somebody's paying a lot more money for a service that somebody else is getting, and they're getting that service done from the same stylist. So what I actually ended up doing sometimes was I would write down what I charged each individual person. Like I always write down like my client records anyway, so I would always have to write down how much I charged them just so I don't forget to charge them that same thing, because I knew I would forget. So to avoid that mistake, I mean, the solution is obvious, but I didn't do this, but if you want to start doing hair on your own, you need to sit down and make up a whole price list of what services you're going to offer and figure out how much you should charge for each service, and don't start offering any services until you have those prices set in stone. So when somebody asks you for a price, you have something to give them, and then when somebody else asks you for that same service, you're going to be charging the same thing. And obviously that should go without saying, like that should have been obvious, but like I said, when I started doing hair on my own, I was really unprepared for it. It just kind of happened, so I was so all over the place with my pricing. And slowly, little by little, I had to like slowly raise prices for certain people, like little by little, until it got to the point where everybody was paying the same thing. But I've been doing this for years, and a lot of the clients that I started with I don't have anymore. I'm not sure if I was just a bad stylist back then, I didn't know, or whatever, but now everybody pays the same thing for everybody. So if you're one of my clients and you're coming across this video, don't worry, I am not like that anymore. That was like, what, like 10 years ago when I started doing this? A little less than that, but that was a long time ago. So everyone is paying the same fair price for all my services now. So the next mistake that I made kind of goes along with the same pricing thing, and it's that I had a starting out price. I didn't call it that, but that's really what it was. So basically, when I first started doing hair on my own, I wasn't really a braider just yet. I kind of just did services that I had just learned in school. Like I used to do everything out of my house. Like I did color, I did highlights, I did haircuts. I don't do all that anymore just because I found you're not supposed to. So if I'm doing color, it's somebody that I know personally, but I don't offer it as like and everyone can come and get this done type of service. For that, you'll have to see me at the shop that I work at. But anyway, so I used to offer everything, and if someone asked me for like a full set of highlights, I would say something like, well, I'm not so good at it right now, so I'm only gonna charge you this much. And to be honest, I didn't do this very often because as I said it, I realized how wrong it was that I said that. So the issue with that, and I've noticed that a lot of new stylists do this, and the issue with that is there's gonna come a point when you're no longer not that good at your service. So if you're offering a major discount because you're not so good at it, the day's gonna come when you realize, okay, I could charge a decent price for this now. You can't just suddenly out of the blue double and triple your prices on your clients and be like, well, I was practicing, but now I feel more confident, so I'm gonna charge more. You can't really do that. That's not really fair. So to avoid that, if you're not comfortable with a service, if you feel like you're not good enough to charge a fair price for a service, you shouldn't be offering it. Because at the end of the day, your clients aren't your mannequins, they're not your practice dummy, they're not your guinea pigs, they're your paying clients. So whether you discount them or not, it's not fair for you to be like, I'm just practicing today, but next time I got to pay like $100 more because I'm gonna be more confident. So if you need practice on a service, don't offer it. Practice on a sister or on a friend or on a mannequin or somebody, but don't offer it as a service if you're gonna have to sell yourself short because you're still in your practice phase. You get what I'm saying? One thing that I know that some stylists that I follow do is that if they are new at a service, they would actually post like, okay, I want to do this service, but I want to perfect it, so I'm gonna offer the next or the first 2 people who respond to this message, I'll do the service for you for free or for however much money. But that would be it. But they won't be going to their clients being like, oh, I'm not so good at this, so I'm only gonna charge you $25 even though I should be charging $125. Long story short, if you can't charge the full price for your service, it's not a service, don't offer it yet. Practice that on the side, and then when you're ready for it, then you can add it to your list of services. So that's that. So another huge mistake that I used to make for the first couple years that I was working as a home-based and traveling stylist was I had no policies set in place. I had no cancellation policies, no no-show fees, no deposits. I did nothing to secure my money when people booked appointments with me. So if someone booked a service with me and I set aside my day or my hours or my time for them and they didn't show up or they canceled last second, I was just at 100% loss. Such a huge mistake. Oops, sorry, had to pause for a second. As I was saying, stylists, if you don't have any policy set in place, you will somewhere along the line lose respect when it comes to your time. And obviously this doesn't go for every single client you'll ever have, because most clients do respect you, but there are always those few, there's always that handful who will casually cancel an appointment or just not show up if they have nothing to lose. So in order to avoid that, you have to have something set in place for them to realize that you take your time seriously, you take your work seriously, and if they set an appointment with you, they need to show up or cancel with a decent amount of time. So I would never recommend starting a business without having some sort of policy set in place, whether it's just simply taking a deposit, which is the simplest way to go, or having, you know, a certain window of time that you have to cancel before you get a charge, or, you know, some sort of fee they have to pay if they no-show you. For me, I feel like the easiest thing to do is to take a deposit from your client and make it non-refundable, or at least not refundable after a certain amount of time. Because the thing is, if a client cancels on you last minute, more than likely you can't fill that spot in the short amount of time they give you. So you need, if you don't have enough notice, you need to have something in your pocket to make up for the time that they took from you, basically. And I went over this before in a previous video. I believe it was my Q&A video. I think I'll link it somewhere on the screen, but yeah, I already went into it on detail on why it's important to set policies. But I personally feel like having a deposit is the best thing to do. So basically you need to give them something to pay you in advance to hold the spot, so if they decide to just not show up, even though you're not going to get most of the money, at least you have something in your pocket. Same thing with if they cancel last minute, it's still time that's wasted, so you want to have at least a little something in your pocket so you're not at a total loss. So when I started, I was not even aware of doing this. Even though I knew salons did that, I didn't think it was necessary for me to do it because I wasn't a salon, I was just myself. And I was just doing hair by myself on the side, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, whether it's your side hustle or your full-time job or career, your time is still valuable no matter what. So whether you take 1 client a day or 50 clients a day, every spot that's booked is valuable. So you can't allow people to just cancel on you whenever they feel like it. So like I said, I explained this in more detail in a previous video, so I'm not going to go too much in depth on that, but definitely have some sort of policy to protect yourself and your money when it comes to your time, because your time is valuable as a hairstylist. Another mistake I made was I didn't charge for traveling when I first started doing this. Because again, I wasn't prepared. Like when I started working by myself, I was working out of my house, out of my kitchen at my old house, and that was it. It was very rare that anyone ever asked me to come to their house. I wasn't really branding myself as a traveling stylist like I do today. So the rare times that I did travel, I never made anyone pay me anything extra for that. And what made me realize that I should was, it was one service in particular. I remember somebody was a bridesmaid for a wedding and she wanted me to do her hair, and she used to come to my house, but on this particular day she wanted me to come to hers, and it was almost an hour away, and the service that she wanted was so short, so I didn't charge her much for it because it was a very simple, quick updo style that took me no time at all. So I only charged her for the service. That took me like 30 minutes, but meanwhile I spent almost 2 hours going and coming from her house. So then I remember coming back home and thinking about it, and I was like, okay, so a good portion of my Saturday was spent just traveling to her house, but I only charged this little bit of money because her service was so short. So I've also mentioned this in a previous video where I mentioned, to be honest with you guys, when you travel, you do end up losing in the long run, depending on how much you charge for traveling, because sometimes the amount of time that you spend driving, you could have taken a whole other client in that amount of time, depending on how far you go. So I always say to make sure that you're compensating yourself for your time somewhere along the line. I don't like to charge a lot for traveling because I am just driving. I mostly just charge to cover the time that I spent and the gas that I spend. But obviously I can't charge the amount of money I'll spend for a full service, but it's better than charging absolutely nothing and spending all your time and spending all your gas, giving somebody that convenience of going to their house rather than have them come to you or have them go to any other salon. You know what I'm saying? When you travel, you are providing convenience for somebody, and convenience costs money. So never, ever travel for free unless you're going to your next door neighbor's house. Make sure you're getting something for your traveling. So another mistake that I made a lot was I didn't ask a lot of questions whenever somebody would book a service with me. So just to make up an example, somebody will say, hey, can you put box braids in my hair? And I will say something like, yeah, that'll be $100. That'll be my whole consultation. I wouldn't ask what size braids they want, how long they want them to be, how long their hair is, and this is just an example because when I first started doing hair I wasn't even doing braids, but I'm just using that as an example. But I never asked enough questions, and I'll wait till they're already there for their service to figure everything out. And truthfully, that is extremely unprofessional, just because when you do services like that, a lot of times it can backfire. Because let's say, okay, let me use color as another example because it's a better example. Let's say, like, I would take a color service and never ask things like, do you already have color in your hair? What color is your hair now? When was the last time you did this? Like, you should know the condition of your client's hair. So if I don't ask those questions, there's a good chance that somebody will come and sit in my chair and I'll be like, oh, your hair's not in a good condition. You can't handle this color. I should have asked that before. Like, I should have had a consultation with them, and I never took the time to do that with clients. So a lot of times I would have to be telling them on the spot that I can't do what they wanted and I have to do something else instead. I don't think I've ever turned somebody away completely, but I would sometimes have to give them a different service, or I'll try and explain my way out of doing the service, if that makes sense. Like, I'll be like, well, you look better if I did this instead or something, you know what I mean? So basically I didn't consult with my clients, and I think it's also because I was so new that I just didn't know what questions to ask. Because truthfully, if you're fresh out of school, you really shouldn't be working on your own, and that's my biggest thing. I kind of rushed into it and I shouldn't have, but I didn't have enough experience to know what questions I should be asking. All I would know was that when I'm starting working on their hair, it wasn't turning out like I wanted to because I didn't know this and that, and then I'd be like, oh, I should have asked them that when they were first making the appointment, but now it's too late because we're here. So that was my main issue. So to avoid that mistake, basically just don't rush into working on your own too quickly, because honestly, when you go to school, you don't learn enough. Like, I'm just gonna say it flat out, you don't learn enough in school to be considered experienced. You learn enough to pass your state board test and get your license, and that's it. It's very basic. Everything in school is very surface. You need to work under somebody before you can consider yourself an experienced stylist, and that's what I didn't do. So that was what I struggled with a lot when I first started doing this. So the last mistake that I have here, and I'm sure I have more to share, but that's all that I could think of for today, but the last mistake that I have have is that I never told anyone the price for their service if they didn't ask. And I really don't know why I was like that. I feel like I was always afraid of offending somebody by giving them a price if they didn't ask for it, because I thought that it would look like I'm assuming that they don't know what I'm charging, or that I'm accusing them of not being able to afford my service. And I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I was always afraid of. So I was like, if they don't ask me the price, then that means that they can afford whatever they want. Because you know how some people, they don't ask prices because they know they can afford it, because they just have it like that? But I've noticed through experience that a lot of times when people don't ask prices, it's because they assume that you're gonna charge them a very cheap price because you're working out of your house, or because you're young, or a lot of times people just assume that they can just pay you whatever they want to. And that's something I dealt with a lot. Oh my gosh, I dealt with that so much. That's another thing I can go into. But anyway, yeah, I realized that I think almost every single time somebody didn't ask me for a price, they will come and get their hair done, and then at the end of the service they'll just hand me money. Like, they'll never be like, how much does it cost, or is this enough? They'll just hand me whatever they think is that the service is worth. And I would always feel too awkward to say anything at that point, because I've already done this whole service, and it's weird for me to be like, oh no, it costs this much to get it done, because now they're like, oh, I didn't know, you didn't say anything about a price. And first of all, I think it's ridiculous that people even assume that that would ever be okay and acceptable, but that has happened so many times. So now what I do is I always make sure that at some point in a conversation when I'm booking with somebody, if they don't ask me for a price, I'm still gonna tell them what the price is. So if they're saying, and I'll use braiding as an example because that's pretty much all I do now. If they're saying, oh, I want some feed-in braids, I'll say something like, how many? And they'll say what they want, and I said, okay, well, that'll be so much money. You know what I'm saying? And then if they say, okay, you know, I want to do this instead, I'll be like, okay, that's fine, but that's going to cost this. Like, I always make sure to just slide into the conversation. I don't wait to be asked, because it's just too risky. And sometimes when I do give them a price, eventually they find some excuse to not come to their appointment, and then that's how I know that that's a client who was planning on not paying, or paying me whatever they want to pay me. But yeah, through my experience, I've just noticed that so many times when you work out of your house, or you work at a traveling stylist, or you just work outside of a shop, people just assume that you don't charge as much for your services. And this isn't something that I've learned like as a starting out stylist. This is something that I deal with to this day, when people just assume that I'm not going to charge you anything. Like, no one understands that this is how I make my money. Like, whether it's my main source of income or not, it's still work. It's still hours of labor that you're asking from me. Like, why would you assume for a second that I don't expect to get anything in return? Like, some people will be booking appointments with me, or they'll ask me to do a service, and they'll say something like, they'll be like, oh, you do hair? Oh, I really want to get my hair braided. I should let you do it, and I'll even pay you. And like, they say it like they're doing me a favor by giving me money for my work. And I'll just be like, obviously you're gonna pay me. Why do you even feel like that needed to be said? Like, that's obvious. That goes without saying. And just to give you guys a little story, I remember one time I was scrolling through my Facebook feed, and someone that I follow had posted a post, and she was basically saying, does anybody know somebody who can professionally cut hair? I want layers in my hair, and I want it professionally done, and I would like the person to be willing to come to my house. I'll even throw them $10. And I remember somebody had commented in that post, and she said, well, I'm not a professional, but I know how to cut hair, so I'll do it for you, LOL. And then she responded and said, yeah, but there's a way that professionals do it that involves angles and stuff. I want it professionally done. So reading this post just irritated me, because like I said, so many people are like this. So basically you're saying you're aware that you're asking for a professional service. You're aware that somebody who's experienced needs to do it, and you're also asking them to come to your house and provide this professional service for you that you can't do by yourself. You're being picky about it, clearly, and you want the convenience of them coming to your house. And you really have the nerve to say, and I'll even throw you $10? Like, that is such a client red flag. Like, never deal with a client who pays you thinking that they're doing you a favor by paying you. You're supposed to get paid for your work. I'm gonna go on and on about this, because this drives me crazy, and I need to get off this topic. So anyway, like I said, this is something that I deal with a lot, and if you're doing hair on your own, you're gonna deal with that a lot. Like, people really do forget that just because you're out of a shop, it doesn't mean that you're not doing professional work. You're still doing professional work. You still deserve your money. And I'm gonna get off this because I'm rambling too much. But you guys get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? Do you get the frustration? Anyway, so all to say is that one of my mistakes was that I would not put my prices in the conversation. So if a client ever asked me how much something costs, I just wouldn't mention it, and I would just assume that they're gonna ask me at some point during the service how much it costs, and I'll say this much money, and they'll be like, okay, no problem. It's not like that. If they don't ask you for a price, bring it up somehow. Just throw it at them. Don't worry about offending anybody. They're supposed to want to know how much you charge. They're supposed to have money prepared to pay you. You know what I'm saying? So that's that. Alright guys, so that's all the mistakes that I made that I can think of anyway when I first started doing hair. I'm thinking of doing a video where I actually explain how I started doing hair on my own, because I kind of feel like I need to explain that for my mistakes to make more sense. So I might do that as my next video. But anyway, so that's it for this video. So I hope I helped somebody out there. And thank you guys so much for watching. And I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!